Okay then, so we've seen the numbers, we've seen what's coming our way, and we've seen a little bit on the repair data thus far. So taking us further into it now and getting the technicalities of it, we've got Adrian Watson and Dean Lander of Thatcham.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. For those that don't know me, I'm the Head of Engineering Research at Thatcham. I've been at Thatcham about 4 years. And it's been really interesting to see in that short period of time that I've been in the industry just how much things have changed. I've deliberately kept slides to a minimum, and in fact, actually, there's a couple of sort of grandmother suck eggs slides at the front of here, which is very much around the reasons why we're in the room, which I think we've probably focused on quite a bit, which is those incentives and the questions around whether those incentives that the governments are providing around the world will stay where they are. We obviously have some very, very defined dates that we're working to at the moment. There is already movement in Europe. There's a conversation in Europe about perhaps that mix changing. Question for us all to question ourselves around is whether we think that that's going to change in the UK. I'm not going to dwell on that one. I'm going to dwell on this one because it starts to raise some interesting questions. We all know what these vehicles are. The question is, do the population know what these vehicles are? So one of the questions around car sales and around, I guess, what people are buying and some of the reluctance that we see outside the fleet market is that one of the factors that we see quite a lot, believe it or not, I see it within Thatcham Research, is that people don't actually know what the difference between a lot of the hybrids are. We have some arguments, would you believe, even within our organisation about whether some of the variants are actually hybrids or whether they're not, or whether they're pure electric or whether they're not, or whether there is ZEVs, which of course is the nomenclature which the government likes to use, at which point we start thinking about whether hydrogen becomes part of the mix. Again, I'm not going to dwell on that. I am going to dwell on this though, and I'm not going to repeat the chart around adoption, but I think it's really important that we all actually give ourselves a pat on the back at the start of this before I start being slightly more negative, because there are going to be some slightly more challenging things that both Dean and I will talk about. But actually, we've done a pretty good job to date. There is roughly 2% of the car park at this point is pure BEVs, but think about the rate of change that there's been out there. Think about the rate of change that the vehicle manufacturers have had to make to what they do. Think about the rate of change of adaptation that we've already gone through to see what we're seeing today. Two cars at the bottom really start telling a picture though, which is we've just been to China and we've been visiting all of the new incumbent Chinese manufacturers, which they're all producing cars in China, but we've not seen many of them yet. And what I want to start painting a picture of to you during this section is about the level of flux, the level of change that is still to come that we all need to recognise. In other words, I guess starting to paint the picture to you that we can make decisions today because we think we know what the future is, but the future is still changing. And that's a really important point for us to recognise and actually to think about when we're making changes in our business. So I've seen my first Aura Funky Cat. I've also seen my first claim that one of our insurer members has sent to us on an Aura Funky Cat, which has total lost that vehicle because they can't get parts and there are no methods to repair it. So there is a lot of flux to come. So just pausing there and thinking about what my role is and what Thatcham's role is. Some of the presentations that we've got for the rest of the day, we've had a fantastic scene set, compliments to the way that the agenda is set out, setting the scene. Our work is very much about trying to think about what's going to come, trying to research things from an insurer perspective, things that are going to touch the insurer workflow that aren't necessarily there today. And so some of the things that I'm going to talk about now aren't necessarily going to be fact. They're things that the engineering, that the research, that our understanding of the insurance workflow and the claims workflow particularly are going to have as impact. They may not arise. And I think the important message, out of everything that I'm going to say is the more that we can keep on top of understanding what might hit us and that change that's coming, and recognizing that there is still a lot of flux in the technology, a lot of flux in the vehicle manufacturers, a lot of flux in the incentives, a lot of flux in the prices of the vehicles as we've been hearing so far, actually recognising that flux is really important. So, post-accident, this is where we really started to do some more detailed work. We spent a lot of time working on safety aspects of electric vehicles in the early days of our research 4 years ago. In the last 3 years, it's been much more focused around what there is post-accident. And I guess what's really important, and I want to really start finding an analogy that works for you, which is that what I would say is the data that we see is inconsistent. What the data tells us is that some people are thinking that EVs aren't a problem at all. Some people are thinking that EVs are the end of the world. And actually the reality is somewhere in between the two. And these are some of the examples of the challenges. So, post-accident transportation. One of the big things which I've heard as a worry, and we haven't quantified how bad that is at the moment, but EVs are heavy. They're heavier than you're expecting. Depending on how you get vehicles recovered from the side of the road, are the vehicles that are sent out from a typical body shop capable of taking the weight of the vehicle and having the right equipment to get that vehicle on board? It's all very well when the market's very tiny, but when we sort of start hitting 25% of the cars on the road being EVs, have we thought about that change? Have we thought about the implications? There's a lot of work being done that is really fantastic around how to respond to the vehicle at the roadside. Does everybody know that? One of the gaps that we see, and we see consistently through all the work that we do, is that there's an awful lot of knowledge in the industry, but is the knowledge getting where it needs to be? So actually, one of the really important points that really all of this is starting to paint is that we can talk about repair of vehicles and we could talk about the claim, but actually, back to that comment about the whole claims chain, everything changes when you have an electric vehicle. A pure BEV, there is no part of that claim that is not touched by that BEV. What I would challenge us all to think about is, from the research that we've done, what I'm not seeing is a lot of adjustment to accept or even understand that that's the case. So I wanted to start to talk about one of the pieces of work that we've been doing recently, which was funded by Innovate UK, and we worked with OZEV on, which was really to do quite a detailed analysis. And it was pretty stylized, pretty idealized, but to actually map the whole of the claims flow for an ICE vehicle. What do I mean by that? What are all the decision points? What are all the parts of that where you would need to make a decision about recovery, about total loss? Everything from ethanol all the way through to either returning the keys to a customer or settling that claim, or indeed putting that vehicle into salvage and understanding what the implications are from a cost and an environmental perspective of salvage. Mapping that and then doing the same for EV. And I don't have the pictures here because, in fact, we were embargoed until today to actually show you that, so it's a bit of a shame that they're not on the slides. But as of today, you'll be able to see a report that comes out of Thatcham that paints those two pictures. And I love flicking between the two slides in the presentations that I've done, because the level of complication on the EV process is significantly more than for the ICE process. One of the challenges, and actually interestingly goes back to what you were just saying in the last presentation around the claims costs. Actually, if you look at the repair part of that, what we're seeing is that if you look at the total claim, not just the repair part of it, we're already seeing additional inflation. The additional inflation for a total claims cost is somewhere north of 25%. And we're also seeing key-to-key times extending north of 15%. We're going to start asking ourselves, well, is that real? Because actually, if we've not adjusted all of our processes to take account of all of these factors, like the weight of the vehicle or the fire risk of the vehicle, do I need to quarantine the vehicle? Do I need storage? What are the rules around the storage of that vehicle for quarantine? Do I have the space at my body shop to do that? Actually, do I need to transport it somewhere else to store it for quarantine? Or indeed, do I then need to transport it somewhere else to a specialist to get it powered down? Because in fact, I can't do that myself. I have to do that in somebody else's network. When you start factoring all of those things in and thinking about all of those decision points, we're probably missing some tricks. The best, I've been trying so hard to find an analogy that really works, and the best I've come up with so far is, if you had a cleaning contract in a house for 30 years and it had 4 bedrooms and 2 reception rooms, and you'd been running that cleaning contract for 30 years, you go in and you clean that house. The person goes around the same room and they do the same actions, they vacuum the floor, they mop the surfaces, they do whatever they need to do in those rooms. At some point along the way, that house gets sold, something changes, and there's a new owner, there's somebody new in town. But you know what? The cleaning contract's been fantastic, so the previous owners say, well, just use them, they're fantastic. What they do is they get in the house and they don't, like so many of us do when we buy a house. We buy a house and we build an extension on it. We know that there's something that we wanted that's different, so we build some more rooms. But you know what? We don't think to change the cleaning contract. So we carry on cleaning the same rooms, and the new bit's getting dirty and it's getting shabby, and we're not doing it right. If I look at the cost of the contract, it's the same. If I ask you whether I'm cleaning the house, I'm cleaning the house. But I'm not cleaning it, I'm ignoring the bits that are new. And one of the genuine concerns we have is that what we're seeing in the data is that we're ignoring the new bits. We're saying everything's fine, but the reality is it's not. And this comes to some of the other challenges that we have. So I want to dwell a little bit on the battery, because actually in reality, from what the work that we've done, is the battery is the thing that causes all the problems to us. So most of the repairs that we see, they're going to be the same as they are on a normal car. Back to the statement that was made earlier, we're seeing a car, we're repairing a car. You know what? That holds absolutely true until we have potential battery involvement in the claim. One of the things I would say is the battery is the most expensive spare part we've ever seen. Somewhere between 20 and 105% of the list price of the vehicle. That changes the equation, because actually we need to start understanding that we need to handle that differently, but actually do we have all of the things at our disposal to do that? And what we're seeing is that something like 43% of the OEMs have some sort of strategy for repair of a battery post-accident. I'm saying post-accident really advisedly, which is we're doing a lot of repair on batteries in the market when it's warranty damage, but there's almost none going on post-accident. The reason for that? The diagnostics don't exist. The diagnostics don't exist to tell us whether that battery is safe post-accident. They don't tell us whether it needs to be repaired or not. We may or may not even look for the damage on that battery as part of the process. Back to the house analogy, I'm not seeing battery damage because you know what? I'm not looking for it because I don't know I need to look for it. Well, there's a lack of information from the vehicle manufacturers telling us. So I guess I'm painting a picture that says, you know what, we're not quite getting this right at the moment. The picture on the right is an example which I use a lot. Picture on the right is an ID4. It's not got many miles on the clock. Theoretically, it should have a lot of value. You can see the level of indent on the underneath the battery casing. That vehicle was a total loss. Now, it was a relatively minor front-end collision, otherwise would have been repairable. But the minute at the moment that we see battery involvement in the process, what we're actually seeing is that we don't know what the state of the battery is. We don't know whether it's safe. We don't know whether we can return it safely to the road. And therefore, actually, what we do if we're not careful is we make the decision that that goes straight into salvage, which would be great if there was some mechanism of realizing the value within the battery. But at the moment, don't believe the hype. There is little or no battery recycling in the UK today. And even if there was, the methodologies that are generally being used across Europe, in fact the world, don't recover most of the value of the raw materials in the battery back into the supply chain. So actually, the statement at the bottom is quite interesting, quite controversial. But from the data that we're seeing, it's easier just to total loss a vehicle if you've got any doubt about what the state of the battery is, And at the moment, there's very little opportunity to do anything with the battery. There's very little opportunity to make any difference, make the right choice, realise its value back. That has to change. So, what am I painting a picture of? I'm painting a picture of the fact that, guess what? We're early in the journey. There's still 1.9, I think it was 1.9 the last time I looked at the data, % of the car park is actually battery electric vehicles. It's not surprising that we haven't got this right yet. But think about the new vehicles, think about the new vehicle manufacturers, think about what was alluded to earlier in terms of the battery technology. Battery technology is changing rapidly. We're going to see much better energy density, much better range. We're going to see different types of battery that are less likely to be setting on fire. And as a result, the vehicle manufacturers are going to take all those nice big metal plates away that protect the battery because it's not going to set on fire. That's fine, but it'll make it more vulnerable so that in incidents, it's much more likely to be damaged. And while we still don't have an ecosystem within the UK that has the ability to get the value back, recycling, reuse applications, which we won't. Why would we at this point in the journey of battery electric vehicles, why would we be trying to get that right? So actually, the reality of the situation is that there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work for all of us to do. I think there's more work that we could do now to think about how we change our processes, how we get more awareness of the information that is there. There's a really other important point, really, which is what I wanted to cover in terms of the skills gap and some of the skills gap that we even see in our own organisation, which is, it's a little bit like some of the focus you see in the press about the negativity about range anxiety, when in fact, if you talk to most EV owners, it's just a change of mindset these days, and actually it's perfectly fine to drive an EV around as long as you plan. Actually, if you're not aware of the things that you need to know, and you're not recognising that you need to train everybody about what the difference is, because every part of the claims chain is affected, then in fact we're going to make other mistakes, and we make those mistakes internally. We dwell far too much potentially in our organisation on the depths of understanding battery chemistry and worrying about range, when in fact actually the things we need to be worrying about is, can we repair these things? Do we have the information? Do the OEMs actually know they need to provide that information in a way that's accessible? And do we have strategies then to actually implement that repair and realise the value of the vehicle? I guess the good bit of news out of all of it, and certainly the piece of work that we've done with Innovate, is there is not a single one of the challenges that we've come across so far which is not already solvable. You know, literally none of them. I know that there's going to be price challenges. I know that's going to change, but from a technical solutioning perspective, it's not like there's some massive research program we need to do globally to work out how to recycle batteries or to repurpose them or to put the right diagnostics within those vehicles. Actually, all of those solutions exist right now. So there's no reason why we could not effectively put that in place. What's the challenge? The challenge with all of this is the scale up. And I think this is going to be interesting to see what's the tipping point? What's the tipping point on the curve that enables enough money to be flowing through the market and enough vehicles that we see in repair to drive a need for the right information, the right recycling, the right repurposing? Because at the moment, there's just not enough, because the investment needed to put all of that in place is too big and it's too daunting. I think the challenge that we're trying to get ahead of from our perspective is trying to create the right level of knowledge around this so that actually these challenges don't become part of the problem and therefore actually affect adoption. Because none of us want to see adoption affected, because that's going to change that rate of change. You know, it's almost that self-feeding win or loss, which is, if we get ahead of the problems, then the problems won't stop adoption, which will build more sales in the market, which will build more volume, which will provide more money, that will fund the solutions. If we just see this as a problem, then we might start seeing the negativity in the press that we currently see around range anxiety and around potentially the environmental impact of EVs not being what people expect. And therefore there'll be less sales, and therefore you see the logic. So I'm going to wrap up, and I'm going to pass to Dean, who's going to really talk about the approach from the skills gap perspective and what the approach there is.
Morning all. I'd like to talk to you about blockchain. Private joke for just a few in the room. So a significant amount of the outcomes of all the research that we're doing that Adrian has spoken about is put into our knowledge sharing mechanisms through our Automotive Academy. One of the easiest things for us to learn is that to solve the problem, education and training is one of the biggest challenges that we got across the marketplace. We already haven't got enough people to repair the volumes of cars that are coming through, and we're struggling to get the knowledge and skills into the people that we have got to deal with the technology changes that are coming along. We're talking about everything on what we call our ACE Plus agenda, everything on the ADAS to automation, everything on the electric vehicle, everything on the connected vehicle. Now, I'm not going to be sales pitchy. You can get training from anywhere. There are a lot of good quality training providers out there. What I am going to get pitchy about is making sure that you pick the right and appropriate training provider to give you the right insight and right knowledge at the right time. And that we focus on training everybody, not just the select few. The IMI start quoting about the potential for there being 160,000 technician shortfall by 2030. That's great. I tell you, there'll be a lot less than that 160,000, a lot more than that 160,000 if you don't start teaching everybody else in the business how to deal with this technology or how to be safe around it. Nowhere have I ever seen a business rely on a single person not to ever make a mistake, ever during their whole working life. But I can see repair businesses relying on one person to have all the EV knowledge because that's all we can afford to train. And I get that that's a challenge because sending them away for 4 days or longer to learn how to get to level 4 takes a lot of money, loses a lot of productivity. Why are we doing it to level 4? You're not expecting your technician today to open up a battery casing and start replacing cells within that battery. If you are, and hopefully you're joining on with the likes of the vehicle manufacturers and taking that training program. So I don't think there's a training provision out there that's quite capable of teaching you to get into battery casing of a multitude of different manufacturers, especially with the constant change in the battery technology. So we bring about a very blended learning approach where we're trying to create training for every person within the business and ensure that it's the right level of training. So the receptionist knows how to talk to the customer and knows how to recognise that it's an electric vehicle, whether that be a plug-in hybrid or a battery electric vehicle, it doesn't matter. That your drivers that are going in and out to pick up these cars have enough knowledge to understand what they're picking up and know they're only picking up ones that are safe for them to pick up. And then the technical side of your workforce to train the painters to understand why do I have to change my process in the paint booth to deal with an electric vehicle? To change your panel team. Why do I have to check that it's made safe before I start welding on a quarter panel? These are the most critical skills and knowledge things that you as a business, as an industry, can train your staff with, because it will save you time and it will save you cost, because those mistakes are very, very expensive. So we built a very clear EV learning journey, identifying the role type within the claims process, and identifying the sorts of knowledge that they would need to keep themselves and their colleagues and peers safe. We modularize this into 2 journeys. One is essentials, which I would advocate that every single person that works in or near any workshop absolutely needs to have. And it's a basic, fundamental awareness of what's being dealt with by that workshop and how to stay safe in that workshop. Then there's the enhanced for all of the rest of the technical team, everybody that might actually physically put their hands onto a vehicle. And the management team. The management team are going to be responsible for bringing those electric vehicles into the workflow. So as they themselves understand, why do I need quarantine space? Why do I need insulated tools? Why can't you just go and grab a pair of pliers out of his colleague's workbench because we haven't got those ones? It's all right. Just don't slow it down just because you can't find the right tool. There's some tools over there. Go and use one of those. That's dangerous. And we've got to make sure that doesn't happen. So we built it out into modularization so you don't have to eat it all at once. We recognize very strongly at Thatcham Research, you stick somebody in a classroom for 2 days, put an expert in front of them, blurting information, just like me here to you guys, but I'm not an expert, that's fine. Blurting information at them for 2 days, they'll take it on board, but they'll have lost 20% of that insight and information within the journey home. And if they don't practice it and see it in the workplace, they'll have lost 50% of it by the end of the week. The reality is, classroom-based learning, you retain about 25% after about 3 months, unless you practice what you've learned. Right? I'm a big advocate. Go on a training course. First thing you need to do the day after the training course is take a day off work, sit down and work out how you're going to implement what you've learned, and then go back to work and implement it. Because if you go straight back to work next day, do what you've always done, you quickly lose everything you've learned out of it. Everything that you see at the top of this slide is modularized, is digital, it's available 24/7, and it stays with the learner. So they never have to lose it. 1 day or 2 days in the classroom with the expert, you walk away, all the knowledge stays with the expert. The expert doesn't follow that delegate around for the rest of their life. This material can, anytime. They can digest it, they can revisit it, they can stay very much up to date. And then we're updating that constantly through the findings of Adrian and his engineering team. And then we have our technical training courses that are delivered at the academy, the ones that actually ensure that you can manage that electric vehicle effectively within your business. EV safe, can you shut it down? Nothing more. Can you approach the vehicle safely, and can you isolate the high voltage electric system and shut it down? You have very few technicians that are ever going to need to do any more than that, right? Especially when it's 2% of the market. But shutting it down is one of the most vital things that you need to understand how to do, where the methodology directs you to do that is one of the fundamental things. And that's where the danger point comes. That's where you are deploying a technician to touch a high voltage system. It's very important that those technicians understand the risks associated with that. It's not just walking up to a big orange cable and pulling an orange plug and going, right, I've done it. Not at all. EV qualification, level 3. How do I shut it down? How do I isolate it? How do I remove component parts of it? There are some very vulnerable component parts of the high voltage system around the front and rear end. I'm going to say it. You can send your technician off to somewhere to do level 3 and they can drop a battery out. Fantastic. They can take 6 bolts off, drop a big block out. Honestly, you're not going to have to do that very often. If you do have to do it very often, then there's something wrong with the design of the vehicle, because the battery's the most protected part. As Adrian said, it's the most expensive service part that we've seen in our life. And it's a warranty part for VM. They're not going to want to make it hard to get out. So you can train them to take the battery out if you want. What about the inverter that's literally right at the front end of the vehicle? So if you get a front corner damage, the most likely part to be damaged on that is the inverter. And it's slightly more complex to remove that inverter than it is to drop a battery out. So think about what you're training your people and who you're selecting. Come to Thatcham by all means. I'd love you to come to Thatcham because I know we're the best. There are other good ones out there, but I urge you to select your training provider with some intent to ensure that it's the right level of training for the right people in your business. And then obviously to ensure robust and ongoing compliance, we use the IMI's accreditation route. EV level 3 qualification, EV accreditation, very similar. They're not massively different, but that ensures that we're doing. If you're going for the IMI accreditation route, remember these numbers and ask the question, AOM 81, 82, 83. Are you getting all of those? Because if you're not, you're only getting the EV safe bit. You're not getting the removal stuff. So it's a very critical path, I think. And we've built our products and our processes so they can be modularized, taken by the businesses. So we've got EV Aware, that's for all, that's completely digital. We got EV Safe, that's for this first contact. This is to be able to isolate the vehicle effectively. EV Competent for those EV techs, make sure that the qualification's there. And for the business, we've got a packaged product, EV Ready, that ensures that every person within that business goes through the right level of training at the right time. And we certify the business as having completed that training program and being EV ready. And then that EV ready can be renewed every year with the latest updates. So as the technology changes, of course, content changes and ensures that those technicians and everybody else that's sitting around the periphery of your body shop remain in the right knowledge space for a completely changing EV-olution. We've got about 65 body shop sites currently EV ready, around 1,000 unique individuals have already been through the program. And we're very keen to ensure that we and other training providers continue to push this high quality but relevant training for your businesses. If we solve the knowledge challenge, we're halfway there. The second step is making sure that we then make our whole businesses ready, the infrastructure, buildings, ramps. Have you got ramps big enough to take the weights? But our next iteration of this is to try and help some of our clients understand what that future body shop requirement is. What does a body shop need to look like? What does the space and capacity need to look like? We're very fearful of some of the research and insight that we've got that suggests the amount of capacity loss if the requirements of the current marketplace for VM demands remains in place and the technology doesn't move us beyond it, that the capacity challenge that we think we're suffering with today is a small drop in the ocean versus capacity challenge we will have with a 100% BEV market. So just finally on that, EV Ready training program, just to reiterate, the EV Aware content, it's all digital, can be accessed anywhere at any time. Level 3 IMI backed qualifications, come to Thatcham and get it, go somewhere else and get it. We don't care. We just want to ensure that it's a It's a relevant certificate ensuring that the individual knows how to keep the rest of your workforce safe. And we will provide an outcome certification for the body shop that hopefully enables you as a business to promote yourself to your work providers and consumers as being EV ready. Thank you very much for your time. Bit early.
Right, marvellous. Thank you very much.
Finished early, guys.
No, you
Well, hold on. You're not getting away that
questions,
easy.
Questions.
There's obviously some questions. In fact, it's come to life on the Slido. So
Yes.
we'll have one quick question before we break, and then we'll obviously carry over several to this afternoon.
So very, very popular subject based on the question. So I'll pick this one then. So how does Thatcham cover all the technology variants from each of the manufacturers to a depth required to manufacturers approved standards?
We don't. We provide the importance of the knowledge to be able to stay safe. We provide insight into the technical skills required to be able to do it. And then we insist that what we're doing, we are training people to be professional to follow the method. The method must follow the vehicle manufacturer specification. If they can follow a method and they have the skills to remain safe, they should be able to deal with the technology, or at least know when they can't. It's really important that they know when they can't. I've been trained enough to know not to go any further with that because that's dangerous.
Yeah. Great answer. Thanks.
Perfect. Right, we'll take over. As I say, lots of questions come in, so we'll take that over to the end of the day during the Q&A, so we can all contribute. Again, thanks very much to you guys. Thank you.